a couple minutes. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us for the Demystifying the Fellows Recognition Program. This is Natasha Musabi with the SMPS headquarters staff. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. On the right side of your screen, you will see the Go to Webinar sidebar. You can click on the orange arrow to expand or minimize the sidebar. There will also be time for questions and answers during this program. You may either type a question directly into the chat box or use the Raise Your Hand icon to ask a question over the phone. Finally, today's program will be recorded and will be posted at www.smps.org/fellows. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today's program. Carla Thompson is Global Marketing Director with Mulvaney G2 Architecture based in Seattle, Washington. She also serves as the Fellows Delegate on the SMPS National Board of Directors, and as such, she oversees the Fellows Recognition Program. She became a Fellow in 1999 and has been a member of SMPS for 30 years. Tom Towns is Director of Business Development with Van Note Harvey Associates in Princeton, New Jersey, and a member of the 2010 class of Fellows. Over his 30-year career, he has helped his clients with a wide range of initiatives, from planning to project completion. Along with his solid capabilities as a project executive, Tom's professional credentials include opening a multiple branch office for national firms, programming, management, strategic marketing planning, and business development. He is serving as the Fellows Chapter Champion to the SMPS Philadelphia and Maryland chapters and will be presenting at the SMPS Uber Conference in Atlantic City. I'd also like to introduce Alla Orlova, Senior Vice President of Education and Certification at SMPS headquarters. Alla is an experienced education leader with over 20 years of domestic and global experience in for-profit and non-profit organizations. Alla has significant experience in training, instructional design, and business development. Okay, moving forward. Before we begin the program, please tell us a little bit more about yourself. Please answer the following question. When are you considering applying to become a fellow? Is it this year, 1 to 2 years, 3 to 4 years, 5 or more years out? I'll give you just a minute to answer, and I'll share the results of the poll. Looks like just a few more are coming in. Okay, and you should see the results of the poll on your screen. Very interesting. Okay, we have a lot to cover, so let's begin. Tom, please take it away.
Thank you very much. I guess I just want to start off by just indicating that this is actually the 4th year running for demystifying the fellow process itself. And part of this got started because I actually became a fellow in 2010. I was actually eligible in 2007. And at that time, I wasn't sure of the direction that I was going to take. And I was a little concerned about the process and whether or not I was actually in a position to really become a fellow. So I did wait. And then I kept receiving the invitations based on eligibility. And then again in 2009, I made the decision to apply my submission. And the primary reason for me doing that was a couple actually answers. One, it was going to enable me to perform some due diligence the way I actually like to, and making sure that I had all the appropriate information. And secondly, I felt at that time I could actually invest the effort, the time to submit a quality application. And from my standpoint, I actually did a little research on this whole process. And one of the main purposes behind this particular webinar presentation is to hopefully make things a little bit easier for everybody to understand and probably not have to put the amount of time that I had to put in. But just as an example, I had spoken to dozens of people who had become fellows. I talked to SMPS staff, and I also teamed up with someone from our Philadelphia chapter at the time to apply together, so we actually could share information as we learned what we were doing during the process. And the end result was I actually spent a lot of time on my part to make the presentation as best as could be. And again, we're trying to make this thing as a little bit simpler or at least easier to understand. And just let me give you one particular comment that we actually got back from people that actually took this or actually listened to this webinar previously. And the comment that we got back was that they actually thought that the broad overview provided was very helpful. And in their particular case, it showed them that it wasn't, that they weren't quite ready to submit. And actually, then it facilitated them by giving them a roadmap of what they needed to address over the course of the following year. So this is here to help you, whether you, I think the percentage was like 50-50 this year, 50 next year. Well, this will help you make that decision a little bit easier, we believe, as well. Okay. When we're talking about why fellow, I think this is something that everybody's going to have to address on their own. One of the questions that I simply asked myself before beginning the process is, why did I want to become a fellow? Now, for myself, I don't typically seek titles, and it's not something that's critical to me, but I was actually thinking and looking at what I would be calling a career justification, especially since I was interested in seeking a new career opportunity which could have taken me to another state. So for me, knowledge, achievement, and credibility were extremely important. And that's not to say that there are or were not other benefits that I had listed were not important, but for me, these three items was the foundation for my pursuit. Something that I really was not aware of when I started the process itself, the application process, were that there were special programs that were being made available to fellows and specific opportunities to participate with other fellows. So for why fellows, it's something you seriously need to ask yourself as well. And the reasoning should ultimately, and I'm going to say this more than once today, the reasoning why you want to become a fellow needs to translate into your application.
Hi, everybody. This is Carla. And Tom's bringing up a really good point that we all have our own personal reasons for wanting the Fellows designation. And because it's personal, I think that's why there seems to be a sense of hesitancy or even mystery about applying. We all wonder, will I meet the standard and how do I live up to that? And that's a healthy way to look at this because becoming a fellow is the highest level of recognition available to SMPS members, so the bar should be high. What I recommend you do is a beta test with the application, kind of like what you did with the CPSM gap analysis. Look at the application in detail. Really think about your responses, and if you think you have a good case, submit. If you think you have some holes that need to be filled in, for example, you haven't published any thought leadership pieces or perhaps done any training, make a plan to fill the gaps. This process isn't intended to be intimidating, but it is rigorous, and that's part of the idea behind this webinar, to help you better prepare and understand how to become a fellow and what it takes to qualify. And this part's important. The eligibility requirements are changing next year, so that may drive your decision whether to apply this year or not, and I'll go into more detail about that. So let's talk about what it means to be a fellow. The purpose of the SMPS Fellows Program is really twofold: to recognize the association's most senior and most accomplished members, and that means those that have made significant contributions to the industry, to the profession, and to their careers. And secondly, to keep those members engaged for the betterment of the society and our members. The collective knowledge of our fellows is one of SMPS's most important assets. And as a fellow, you will be called upon by me to share your knowledge and continue perpetuating professional services marketing at the highest level possible. Part of my goal as the Fellows Delegate this past 2 years has been to bring a renewed energy to the Fellows Program by creating more and better opportunities for fellows to serve and be recognized as a resource at the chapter, regional, and national levels. So trust me, I will be calling on you.
And I will tell you, she certainly has done that to me. Let's talk about the role for a second here. And we've got plenty of things to address here today. When you're recognized as a fellow, you're actually going to begin a new chapter in your SMPS professional career. There are actually 3 roles a fellow will play within SMPS, and they are just as you see them that are written above: honor outstanding individuals, meet the needs of fellows, and use the talents of fellows. So actually, let's go and start talking about those right now. First, the honoring the outstanding individuals. As a fellow, you're going to become part of a select group of achievers who not only have access to programs tailored to your needs, but will also have the responsibility to accept leadership roles in the society and mentoring roles in the profession. One of the greatest of these is going to be mentorship. One of the exciting opportunities of being a fellow will be the special events that are going to be offered you. And we're going to actually talk about that a little bit more in a minute, too. A few of those opportunities will be educational, networking, and even social. You will be responsible, and I've actually underlined that word for myself, to help define the leadership and management issues to be addressed in professional development. To me, again, the key word is responsible. As a fellow, is also an obligation attached to that title as well. As far as using the talents of fellows, with obligation, there are also going to be clear expectations. Fellows are expected to serve as leaders and mentors, and you will be expected to find opportunities through writing articles, serving as mentors, serving as leaders, and then also promoting SMPS itself.
In other words, continue doing more of what you're already doing. One specific example of a need the fellows are currently serving is the role of chapter champion that Tom mentioned. He and I are both chapter champions for our chapters, and he has 2 chapters, as a matter of fact. This is a program I started last year to re-engage fellows at the chapter level, to serve in an advisory capacity. Sometimes when you become a fellow, you kind of fade into the background, and we didn't want that anymore. So more than half of our fellows are chapter champions and offering themselves as mentors, program speakers, strategic planning facilitators, or whatever their chapter leaders or members need.
Now here we start to get into some of the requirements for your submission or being eligible to submit. And actually Carla is going to address in just a few minutes what's going to be changing down the road. But let's just read the slide as it's written right now. You are required to be an active member of SMPS for 10 of the last 15 consecutive years. And in this particular case, it's going to be since 1/1/1999. And you must be currently a member in good standing. You must have served 10 years of experience as a marketer or business developer in the AEC industry. And pay attention to that. That's the AEC industry. You must hold a current CPSM certification designation. And then lastly, regardless, you still have to complete the detailed application. That has to be done.
So as I mentioned, the rules are changing next year, and so that may affect your decision. The Board of Directors recently approved a change to the eligibility requirements, and the AIA and engineering societies have all modified their licensing programs to require more real-world work and experience. And SMPS is following suit and increasing the standards for fellowship as well. So starting next year, you'll be required to have 15 years experience as a marketer and/or business development rather than 10 years. The other change is a requirement to maintain CPSM certification for a minimum of 5 years. It's a big change. Right now, you just need to be a CPSM. And as I said, these changes raise the bar significantly, so they may influence your decision. But it doesn't give you a free pass this year. You still need to meet the criteria. You still need to fill out the application, and Tom's going to go over that in more detail.
So let's talk about limitations. And here are some important facts that you need to know about the application and some about the application reviews. One item, no more than 5% of the SMPS total membership may be fellows at any time. And just to give you a quick example, right now there are approximately 6,225 members, of which 115 are fellows. Now these are current references, but based on these numbers, there is a limit of 311 fellows. So obviously there's going to be room for new fellows, and at this particular count there would be 117 spots available. But now you need to go through these other pieces as well. Just because applications are received each year, there is not a requirement that a fellow be recognized. Jurors reserve the right to name no fellows in a given year. There is no appeals process in the program. The fellow title is valid only for regular SMPS members, distinguished life members, emeritus members, and again, all in good standing. One must also maintain an active membership in SMPS to be a fellow. If for some reason membership lapses, the fellow designation may no longer be used. But if membership is reinstated, the fellow designation will also be reinstated. Now, application deadline. The deadline to submit your application to the national office this year is going to be April 17, 2014. That means that you have a little over 7 weeks to complete the application. And I'll explain and talk a little bit more about that as well, because I personally believe you're going to need somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks to get this application together. And I'm just talking about the overall schedule, not that you're going to spend every hour of those 4 to 6 weeks putting it together. Application fee, it's $250. And going back and thinking about when I made my submission to become a fellow and thinking about it, $250 is and is not a lot of money. But for me, it's one of the reasons I did the research that I did, is I wanted to make sure that the financial investment that I was going to be making was appropriate. I certainly didn't want to pay $250 if I knew I would not be ready. It's just throwing money away, and I'm not suggesting that you do that either. And this is a great reason from my perspective, and we're going to use this word probably several times during the presentation, is to do a beta test about your application. And that beta test is really simply saying, am I ready? Do I have everything that I need to do to be in a position to submit a good application? So let's talk about some of those things in just a second. And for myself, one of the things that I did in terms of from an original research standpoint was with some current fellows. Now for this presentation and to help you, I have actually spoken to fellow jurors in the past on 2 different occasions, because I thought that that input would actually help you in terms of some of the things that they have been through, some of the reviews that they did. And keep in mind, jurors are going to be changing, so we're going to talk about that in just a second as well. So let's go to the next slide. As far as the jurors itself, they consist of 6 fellows. The application review process, and a little bit more also about the jury. Members are appointed on a 2-year term. The jury terms are staggered so that 3 members will retire from the jury each year, and 3 new members will be added each year. The fellows delegate to the National Board of Directors, in this particular case, which is Carla, serves as an ex officio member of the jury. She cannot vote, so don't bother her. Jurors serve no more than 2 consecutive years. Now, I'm going to tell you why I thought this was important and why I'm telling you it's important. It tells me that there are new people on the jury every year and that change is going to be constant. Now, while the process is intended to be as objective as possible, there are certainly going to be opportunities for different views on the importance of specific criteria within the application. And trust me, when you see some of the comments that come back, people have different opinions about what they view and how they view it. As far as juror conduct is concerned, and I think this is pretty simple, during the tremendous amount of research I did, I never knew who the names were of the people that were on the jury, and that's before I became a fellow. And to be quite honest, I really wasn't interested in that either. And my advice to you is do not go there. And the simple reason for that, it could work against you, and it can also lead to disqualification. Now, Carla, were you going to go over the jury conduct here?
I can. So each juror is given an evaluation form, and it serves as a guideline. There's a point system to evaluate the applications, and each juror uses the same criteria to score all of the candidates. So as Tom says, it's intended to be as objective as possible, but you know, people's opinions are subjective, and that's the point for bringing up the point about the jurors changing. If you don't make it one year, doesn't mean that you won't make it the next year. So what happens after you've submitted? Everyone's going to get a notice from me, a phone call, a results of the application. And if you're successful, you're going to get a call where I'm going to congratulate you on your fellowship, and we'll do a little happy dance over the phone together, and I'll let you know when you can post it on social media. Last year, I told one person on a Friday and didn't tell the rest until Monday, and he posted it, so everybody else thought they didn't make it. So this year, we're going to control that. So the notification will recur before the end of May. I promise you that. That gives you plenty of time, if you haven't already done so, to register for Build Business, where you'll be recognized during the awards gala. Conference this year is on July 30th, 31st, and August 1st in San Antonio, and I encourage you all to attend because it's life-changing. If you're unsuccessful, I will also let you know, and I'll let you know where the jurors determined that you were deficient in your qualifications. This is important because you'll know what areas need attention before you submit again.
Great. Thank you, Carla and Tom. At this time, we'll begin taking questions from the audience. You may ask a question by directly typing it into the chat box or raising your hand to ask a verbal question. Okay, it looks like we had a question earlier about what prompted the new fellows requirements that we're going to be updating next year.
So the fellows jury and I worked together on this and made recommendations to the national board, and it was there's two parts of it. One is that it really is staying in line with the other associations. We modeled the fellows program after the AIA fellows FAIA, and we wanted to stay in step with them. Also, it is intended to raise the bar. This is the highest level of recognition we give, and so 10 years of experience, honestly, it's not enough experience to qualify as a fellow. I didn't submit my first time until I had 20 years of experience, and even then I felt like, oh, geez, do I really deserve this? So it really is about getting more real-world working experience, and just making sure that the fellows represent the very highest level of experience and knowledge within our organization.
Sounds great. Thank you, Carla. We'll take one more question at this time. Can you explain more about the mentoring portion of the application?
Let me just add real quick. I think that when we get into some slides in a few minutes, you'll fully understand what we're asking or talking about. And if you have more questions about mentoring, then I would suggest you raise that question again at the second question and answer session.
Okay, and we'll just take one more question and then we'll move on. Will you share the jurors' scoring criteria with the candidates?
We don't share the criteria, but I will tell you that if you are deficient in one area, you can make it up in another. So you don't have to be spot on in every one of the categories. The categories that you see listed on the application are the same categories. I just can't share with you what the points are that go with them. So there's just right in line with what's in the application, which Tom's going to go over.
Okay, and we'll take more questions as we go later on in the program. Thank you.
And I'm going to actually go back for myself and just repeat one thing. And part of this process is to enable you to understand when you submit your qualifications that you're going to be as successful as you possibly can. And also to make sure you understand where you may be deficient. And hopefully that determination will benefit you in the long run. Now, again, going back to some of the juror comments and important information in terms of some of the research that I had done and I continue to do with the jurors, I was allowed to speak with a number of former jurors. Now, when I did this, I didn't have the opportunity, as I made note earlier, but I felt it was important for you to be able to understand how jurors actually viewed previous applications. Now, these are some of the important takeaways I learned from these conversations, and I think that you should also learn from them as well. Now, some of the things that the jurors talked about is that they're looking for sustained leadership in the profession. And again, not again, but in this particular case, sustained was the key word that they referenced. They talked about passion, and you're going to see another note, or I'm going to talk about another note as well, but they want to know about passion and about what you're doing well and what you're doing right. The passion needs to show in the application. You need to show that you've done something notable. And what is something notable you have done in the profession, not something you've done notable outside the profession. You need to talk about and illustrate, or not illustrate, but indicate your major contribution or contributions within and outside of SMPS. And then also you need to address very clearly your overall career performance. Now, one particular reference that I got back just recently, because again, this is the 4th year in a row that this is being done, but some of the jurors, they truly discussed, they talked about the actual presentation and the submissions. And this is what their comment was. They truly discussed what they will accomplish in the future as a fellow, not just what it means to them. And the comment was, sure, it is a great thing to have and to know that you have contributed a lot in the past to SMPS and the industry, but they wanted to know what is still to come from you as a person and as a professional. And another quick comment that we got back was, I looked for how they are involved in other societies and organizations in our profession or in the community. So again, they're looking for passion, they're looking for things that you are doing notable as well. And again, don't hesitate to use these criteria, these comments, when you actually perform your beta test, am I ready? Now, the next thing we did was also we actually went back and referenced and commented with the jurors about, all right, what were some of the misses that you saw when you actually reviewed some of these applications in the past? And here's what they had to say. Concrete mentorship from outside the firm. And the piece is, do not underestimate the value of a mentorship role. And we will be talking about mentorship some more. Results and outcome from mentorship. It's okay, for example, to say that you were or are a mentor, but the thing is, what are the results? The results need to be documented in the application. National leadership. And again, these are top misses that people didn't represent. Now, while national leadership is not a requirement, it can be reviewed as critical. And that goes back to the comment that I made earlier about you have 2 different jurors each year, and how people look at things can be different from year to year. If you can, suggestion is get involved on a national level, even if it's only on a committee. Now, for me, when I originally had the opportunity to become a fellow, I recognized this was going to be a shortcoming for me. And I then had the opportunity to participate on a national level. In that particular case, it was the Education Committee. And then I went and moved into a chairman position at that time. So I recognized from a beta test position I was missing something. I addressed it so that I was ready. Another particular miss, RFP was not clearly read. Make sure you read what you're being asked to provide. Again, this is basic marketing 101. Reply in the order you are asked for information, and do not go outside the lines. Those lines are there for a reason. Now, a recent juror made a comment about their particular review and said there are a few typos in one or two, but mostly the mistake that they saw was the lack of personal stories, and here's that word again, passion. But I not only looked for interesting writing, but ones that could put their personality and stories into their writing. It really gave me a visual of them. I could see and feel the passion in their writing. So again, it's making sure you clearly write what you're doing and what you're looking to do. Some of the evaluation guidelines. Now, just like you would base a proposal around the evaluation guidelines, your fellows application should consider the 6 evaluation criteria that's provided in your documents. They're clearly written, and they provide specific information on what is required within each criterion. Now, this information is a huge help in completing the application, so please be sure to review it carefully. As the slide indicates, the evaluation criteria includes education and work history, contributions made to the profession, made to SMPS, made as a mentor, endorsements and testimonials, and then the candidate statement. Now, here are some of the parameters that we need to address. It's important to be aware of the 6 evaluation factors because those should be evidenced in the 5 main parameters included in the application. Those parameters, again, and all do include work history, SMPS activities, significant contributions, mentorship, endorsements, and testimonials. And here's a piece of advice that I think is extremely important for everybody. If it's important, be sure to include it. So you are ready to start completing the 5 sections of the application. This is very relative to the why I have mentioned before. If you think it's important, guess what? It probably is. Make sure you include it in your presentation. First parameter, work history. This is the first of the 5 sections. What's important here is to make sure you emphasize your experience in marketing and business development at each company. Be sure to list your levels of responsibility which reflect your leadership and how you grew with your leadership. SMPS activities. You're going to need to address your SMPS activities as indicated. Jurors are going to be looking for how you have participated at each level of SMPS. When you do write these, make sure you distinguish between national, regional, and chapter positions, as well as programs and awards. If you're looking to pursue your fellow recognition in the future and not this year, look to make sure you focus your roles within SMPS at all levels. This is part of that beta test again. If you're lacking there, make sure you fill in the blanks. Significant contributions. Here's where you have the opportunity to really tell your stories, show your passion, and emphasize the why. Professional contributions. What is your most significant contribution to the profession? This is all encompassing and not just within SMPS. Address how you make a difference. For example, have you written articles for trade publications, for any publication, presented a series of educational programs, or actively participated in a client organization? Don't leave any of it out. What have you done for SMPS? And now I'm talking about contributions. And what do you want to contribute to do for SMPS? Remember, this is just a small step when you become a fellow because there are going to be commitments and obligations. So what you're going to do as a fellow is going to be important eventually here as well. You need to provide examples of contributions related to chapter. Here's the breakdown again. Regional, national leadership, all in education, finances, membership, and or management. Mentor contributions. And again, a lot of the reviewers are going to look at this very strongly. One of the greatest aspects of SMPS is the members' willingness to support other members, which from my own personal standpoint, I have found, which is not common in other professional organizations. We all seem to be willing to help each other. Are you offering mentorship to others right now? If you're not, you need to start doing it so that you can submit and you fill in the blanks again with regards to the beta test. If not, you need to. You're going to need to provide a summary with evidence and specific examples of a significant, sustained contribution made by the applicant as a mentor. Fellow significance. You're going to have to talk about why you want to be a fellow. You're going to need to provide a statement describing to the jury what becoming a fellow means to you and how you expect to continue or expand your contributions to the profession and to SMPS as a fellow. And what is paramount is what you're going to do for the profession and not just SMPS. Now we're going to get into more specifics here, and we're going to talk about endorsements and testimonials. This is one area you're going to need to begin on immediately because this has to do with having your act together within 4 to 6 weeks. You're going to need to make contact with people and get their support. You're going to need to get a total of 7 letters of testimonial and endorsement. And this, again, is why I believe why you're going to need the 7 weeks between now and April to get your application together. You are now going to be depending on other people to help you. If we're all by yourself, you probably wouldn't have any issues. But you know as well as I do, once you bring other people into the mix, now you're going to be dependent upon them for support. So let's talk about some of these endorsements. Someone from the chapter, specifically the current president, immediate past president, or president-elect is going to need to endorse you. They will need to attest to your significant contributions to the society. Now, this is my particular piece of advice. While you don't want to write the letter for them, my suggestion to you is do not hesitate to remind them with what you believe have been your contributions. Otherwise, you may end up getting a letter that doesn't address what the jurors are looking to see. And if you're not directly affiliated with the chapter, this is something that needs to be addressed with you in terms of an endorsement letter. This is a special situation. But let me just go back one more time with regards to the letters themselves. I know from my own standpoint, when I put together my letter or I asked for a letter and I got it back, there were some missing elements in there that I had to go back and ask them to rewrite it because they had forgotten about some of the contributions that I had made. Another letter that you're going to require is going to be from the person that you mentored. And we talk about this quite a bit and have mentioned this several times. This could be one of the most important letters you are going to request. You're going to need that testimonial letter. It can't exceed 2 pages from the protege describing your relationship. Remember the word passion again. The letter must address the sustained contributions you made to the mentee, citing specific examples. Having them elaborate on what your membership or mentorship meant to them is extremely critical. And as an example, when I spoke with my mentee, I actually gave them a copy of the contributions of the mentor section I had to complete as part of the narratives. You can ask them to write a letter, but if you give them what the letter needs to address, they're going to know what they have to get ready to prepare for. This way, you're both communicating compatible information. Just remember, let them write what your membership meant to them. The protege cannot be a coworker or employee of the candidate. SMPS is looking for what you have done outside your day-to-day job responsibilities to encourage others in the profession. Now, there might be some specific questions related to coworker. They no longer work for you. The question is going to be when you mentored them. Those things can actually be addressed if you have that situation and that question does come up. But let me just give you a couple of comments that came from other people that had actually presented recently and statements that they made. What was unclear to them was that the mentee letter and whether or not the person could have worked with them in the past and now works somewhere different, and if that was okay to include. It is, as long as the mentorship occurred outside of the office environment. And I'm pretty sure I've got that correct, and if I'm wrong, somebody will make sure it's corrected. Another statement that somebody made that had made their submission. They had to clarify some questions about the mentoring portion, as they had not formally mentored anyone, but had actually mentored a new board member. And I'm going to share with you is that I had actually done a mentorship, and I had actually mentored a new board member, but it was a mentorship. It wasn't one conversation. It was a process that we worked together, and that mentorship actually ended up occurring over a period of time, not just limited to the board time that she actually spent on my board when I was a past president. Mentoring. The successful candidate demonstrated a sustained effort over time as a mentor and clearly demonstrated how the mentoring relationship impacted the protege's growth and often times their own in the process. They were clearly not mentoring as one of the requirement steps as being recognized as a fellow. But they exhibited passion in helping others grow and succeed. That word passion comes up an awful lot. It's not a word that I'm making. It's a statement that's being made by a lot of the people that submitted and a lot of people that actually reviewed the process. So remember that word passion, and you're hearing it enough from me as well already. You're going to need to submit 5 testimonial letters from individuals, at least 4 of whom are SMPS members and 2 of them whom are SMPS Fellows. The letters are going to need to substantiate your significant contributions, and again here we talk about to the profession, to SMPS, and or to individuals, and it's going to need to highlight specific examples of the applicant's abilities and accomplishments. No testimonial letters can be more than 2 pages, and no more than 5 testimonial letters will be considered. So if you're thinking about doing 6 or 7 testimonial letters, guess what? Somebody's going to look at it eventually and say, they didn't listen, they didn't pay attention, why did they submit 7? Yeah, it's great to have them, but don't submit more than 5 testimonial letters. Now here are some hints that I'm going to provide you from my own experience and also talking with other people. And I think these are good hints, so pay attention. Consider providing contribution examples to the writers in advance for them to choose from for their letters. I know from experiences that I had to make sure people knew what the contributions that I had been making, and I had to actually make sure that they had not forgotten some very important contributions or accomplishments that I had made in the past. I didn't write the letter for them. I only let them know and help them with the content. What they chose to use and what they chose not to use was up to them. The key thing is I didn't want them not to have all the references that they needed and that they knew about. Now here's another item that you can choose to use or not, but I would strongly suggest that you do that. You've got 7 weeks. I would ask for more than 5 testimonial letters. This will be your safety valve for a couple of reasons. One, in case somebody forgets, or someone leaves you hanging and you end up falling short of the required 5 letters. You don't want to submit more than the requested 5 letters. It's your choice to get testimonials from outside SMPS. Just make sure 4 of them were within SMPS and 2 of those are from fellows. If you know 4 fellows who can give you testimony, go for it. Nothing wrong with that. It's just you are required to bring in 2. Remember, and again, these are testaments from individuals that know you, not know of you. And I'm going to say that again because I think it's extremely important. These are testaments from individuals that know you, not know of you. Because I've been asked on occasion to provide some testimonial letters. I know of them and I knew of the people, but I did not know them. If you ask for a fellow for a testimonial and they turn you down, it may be because they're on the fellows jury, which precludes them. So don't take it personally. It has happened to people. So let's talk about timing. I mentioned this several times as well already. Don't wait to the last minute to work on your submission. I really believe you need to be focusing on that now if your intention is to submit this coming April. And I can tell you from experience and from reviewing and talking to former jurors, if you wait till the last minute, it's going to show and it's going to create a problem in terms of your successful submission.
Great. Thank you, Tom. We'll begin taking some questions. We'll just take 2 or 3 at this time. Okay, so going back to kind of talking about the word limitations. How does one interject personal stories and include everything that's important given the word limitations?
I'm going to tell you it's not easy, but people do it, and people have been successful. And I think that just goes down to personally how you present it and what's the important pieces to show. So if you've got an opportunity to show passion, that's where you've got to show it first and foremost. And then from there, you just got to go back and start cutting.
It's no different than a proposal where we have a word count or a page count. We have to be creative. We have to write concisely. It's, you know, it's, you got to be a good writer. That's what it requires.
Great. We'll take our next question. What percentage of people are accepted to be a fellow, on average, from the number who apply?
There is no set percentage. There have been years where there have been no fellows brought into the community, and there's been some years where they've all made it through. So there really is no set percentage at all. It depends
Carla,
on
how many made it last year? Can you remember that?
7 made it through.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I think 9 the year before that.
Great, and we'll just take one more question at this time and then move on. Out of the 100-point scoring, is there a minimum number of points that you need to receive in order to be named a fellow?
Yes.
Okay, we'll take more questions later on in the program. We'll have more time for Q&A.
All right, we're going to talk a few more minutes about some more juror comments. And again, when I spoke to past jurors, I actually asked them again about what they were looking to see and what mistakes they saw when they did their reviews. And the first item that you talked about was the role of and I think the key for people here is going to be the role of creativity. Now, I know that I was concerned about the application and how it should look. And actually, Natasha, I think you can move the slide. As marketers, remember this. This is not a proposal. The judges are not going to be looking for glitz. In fact, you're constrained by all the fill-in form with a word count, so creativity is not going to really be a factor. It's going to be really based on the quality and the content, and that's what's going to count. They are judging you, and they're judging you alone, and they're not judging you against others that are making the submission. Simple advice, keep it simple, keep it truthful, make sure it's complete, and make sure your story is completely and totally made. Now here's some previous mistakes that jurors pointed out. And this is obviously, from my standpoint, you know, when I talked about earlier teaming up with somebody that was going to be making the submission as well, this wasn't my only source, but I actually had someone proof my submission. It needs to be well written and minus mistakes. Now, one particular submitter within the last year actually had another fellow coach them through the process. And actually, their application got reviewed multiple times, and that person was able to get some excellent suggestions regarding areas of improvement. Now, their recommendation was they strongly suggest including the tip to get a fellow coach as part of the preparation process covered in the webinar. If you can find one that's willing to do that, I encourage you to do that. But forgetting that fact, there are other people that actually can help you review, because there are going to be simple, minor mistakes that can be made that you need to make sure this submission is done. Just because you make a mistake doesn't mean that you're going to get rejected. It's going to be the consistency of the mistakes that are going to be reviewed. It says they're not ready because if they can't do this, they can't do the submission and the process the correct way. Another person wrote, another recent juror wrote, or actually a person that made a submittal, was a couple of submittals were done in a hurry, and it was clear they were not proofed due to the spelling, grammar, and context issues. Additionally, some of the issues with expecting the juror to read another section because the candidate did not want to reiterate a message that was elsewhere. While this was due to the limited text, it was harder to follow and review. Now, while you may be anxious to get your fellow recognition, make sure you're ready. Beta test again. Read what is requested of a fellow, and if you are comfortable with your accomplishments, listen, by all means, go for it. If you're not, I'm going to simply make a recommendation to you to wait a year and fill in where you feel you have holes. This is your story, and it needs to be a complete story with specificity. And in referencing Marketing 101 again, follow the rules. If you have any questions about what we've talked about today or things that you run into, the national staff that's on here today, Carla or myself, we'll get you answers, and we'll provide you with ways to get in contact with you at the end of the presentation here.
So I think it's important to summarize a few of the things that you've heard from Tom today, kind of put an exclamation point on some of these things. And some of the things that I just heard, too, I just wanted to go back to. In terms of the work history, they're not looking for roles and responsibilities. Tom said call out leadership, and that's exactly what they're looking for. How have you progressed in your career? How have you contributed on a strategic level to the leadership of your company? So that's an important thing. In terms of professional contributions, the reason that we've added that as one of our categories this year is because it isn't just about SMPS. As a fellow, you're going to be a representative of SMPS, so we want to know that you're willing to get out there with client organizations and other professional associations, so that's an important part as well. The testimonial letters, in the ones that I've seen, sometimes the testimonial letters tell a better story than what's been told by the candidate. So my suggestion is when you read those, if it comes through better in their writing, you should pick up on some of what they're trying to do. As Tom said, use your Marketing 101 skills to do basically a go, no, go when considering the fellow's application process. Do that beta test he's been talking about on the application. Think through it from your reference letters, where they're going to come from, outline your responses to the application, and find any gaps and develop a plan to fill those. Ask your chapter champion to review it if you're unsure. And if you don't know who that is, let me know and I'll get you the contact info. Every chapter has a fellow who serves as a chapter champion, so that's a good place to start. Remember that fellows can comprise up to 5% of the SMPS membership, and we're way below the limit. So there's plenty of room for growth in the fellows program, and the fellows want that. But we're looking for qualified candidates. We're not looking to fulfill a quota because there is no quota. The application needs to focus on sustained leadership in your career, the profession, and SMPS. As Tom said, document specific examples. Don't talk in generalities. In Tom's research and in my own observations and conversations with fellows and candidates, one of the most challenging areas to fulfill is the mentorship requirement. That's why it came up as one of the questions. You need to mentor someone outside of your firm and be able to document specifics of that relationship and how it contributed to their growth. And just as you would with an RFP, follow the guidelines. That's why they're there. And your reference letters must highlight specific examples of your experience working with the author of the letter. Tom talked about that. Generalities will appear as if you two are not strongly connected, and that's not going to work. And if you don't know a fellow, this is a good time to start getting involved with your chapter champion and start using them as a mentor. That's exactly what they're there for. I'll also share that many people have the perception that becoming a fellow is the pinnacle of their career. Like you receive this huge honor and there you go, you're done. You've done it all. You can put the FSMPS on your title block and you're good to go. Well, this is the absolute wrong perception or reason to apply. If you're using this to build your resume, it's not the right reason. Receiving the Fellows designation is really another jumping off point to be able to give back to the profession, to SMPS, and the industry. So take time to consider why it's important to you and how you will use the Fellow designation to make a difference and highlight that in your application. That's the passion that Tom keeps talking about. You should also go into this with the attitude that if you don't get the designation, you will be given a good constructive feedback on what's needed to be successful the next time around. So remember that this process is a win-win, that either you're awarded the designation or you're provided with specific advice on what to do the next time around to gain the designation. And finally, don't downplay your achievements and contributions, which I think is sometimes very easy for us as marketers to do because we're used to making other people look good. Putting this application together is tough, but it's like giving yourself one huge pat on the back. It's a humbling experience for sure, but when you're done with your application, you'll be proud of all you've accomplished and given back. That's probably the best part of this whole process, is to look back and realize how much you've contributed along your SMPS journey. So once you become a fellow, what happens? Well, as soon as you become a fellow, you'll be granted access to the Fellows section of My SMPS. It's there that you'll find national speaking and publishing opportunities, because we're always trying to get our fellows out there, and a chat room just for fellows. We even use the fellows community to start a betting poll for the Super Bowl to raise money for the Fellows National Scholarship, which was a lot of fun. Yay, Seahawks, by the way. That money will be combined with the money we raise at the Fellows Raffle at Build Business, so we can award 2 scholarships to SMPS this year. And yes, as a fellow, you'll be asked to support our fundraising efforts any way you can. But trust me, it feels so good to pay it forward to members who are on the pathway to becoming fellows. We're currently in the process of updating the Fellows Resource Directory, which will be available to all members and the public to promote our fellows as subject matter experts for anyone looking for speakers, writers, or consultants. It's a great tool for chapters. It's great tools for regional conference planners, and for people outside of our industry when they're looking for somebody to come and do presentations at their events. The Fellows Committee and I are always looking for ways to bring the fellows more to the forefront of the organization by strengthening their involvement in local, regional, and national events. And a good example is the Fellows Forum program I started 5 years ago at the Seattle chapter, which has spread to numerous chapters and is at most regional conferences now and at Build Business. The forums ensure that fellows are not put up on a pedestal or put on dry ice. We want people to know that the fellows are approachable, available, and accessible as a resource to all members. You'll also be invited to fellows-only networking events at Build Business, where you get to rub elbows with the best marketers in our business, which that was the reason I wanted to become a fellow, was to be with those people. And this includes a fellow symposium, an educational program geared to the needs of the fellows, which, as a fellow, you get to help define what those needs are. Of course, that's where we'll also officially welcome you to as the Fellows Class of 2014 during the Gala Awards program. And some new fellows bring their parents or their spouse to share in the celebration, because becoming a fellow is a really big honor. There are many, many opportunities ahead for fellows, and if you make it this year, I look forward to welcoming you at a special orientation luncheon at the National Conference to see how we can get you involved in the Fellows program right off the bat. I wish you all much success in your journey to become a fellow. It's not easy, but it's definitely worth it.
Thank you, Carla. All right, we'll take one more question after you've got all this information. We'll go ahead and open our first question here. Based on today's webinar presentation, when will you consider applying to become a fellow? Please take a moment to just choose the answer based on your timeline.
And Natasha, I think it's good to just indicate here that this is just a repeat in the first round, only because based on what you've learned today, we want to find out if there are any people that are now considering changing their process.
Yeah, with the change in the criteria, does that change your decision to go for it this year, or is it going to put it off for a few years, or what's going to happen?
Okay, looks like the results are in, and you should be seeing the shared poll results on your screen.
Great.
It looks like a few more have decided to wait, maybe do the 5+ years now. Okay. And now we'll take wrap-up questions. Please type your questions into the chat box, and we will get to them. Okay, we have a couple questions at this time. Our first question. If I wanted to reach out to several friends who are fellows to get their input on whether or not I should apply this year, and I don't know if those individuals are on the selection panel, will I be putting my application in jeopardy?
Not at all. If they're on the jury, they will let you know that they can't participate. They could probably give you some, recommendations, but they can't submit a letter for you or review your application. But it doesn't put you in jeopardy at all.
Great. We'll take our next question. If you are a new CPSM and you do apply and you're not selected, do you then need to wait the 5 years to submit again?
Yes. So my recommendation is make your application as strong as you possibly can. It really is about your contributions to the profession, to SMPS, and what you've done within your own firms and as a mentor. If you have all that selection criteria set, you'll be fine.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the beta test again. if you're ready, you're ready. It shouldn't mean that you have to wait 2 or 3 years to do it based on the criteria that exist today. If you do the beta test and you're not ready, then there is that 5-year period, unfortunately, but you won't be wasting your time making a submission now or spending money that would not be better invested later.
Great, thank you. We'll take our next question. Carla, you mentioned earlier, if you don't know a fellow, and you mentioned chapter champions, where can I find a list of the chapter champions?
There's a list on mysmps.org/fellows, and you can always reach out to me. I'm always happy to help.
Okay, it looks like we're all caught up with our questions at this time. Carla and Tom, thank you. And do you have any comments before we wrap up today's session?
Well, I just want to thank Tom. As he said, this is his 4th year doing this. He put this together on his own accord because he recognized that it is an intimidating process, and he wanted to demystify it. And I think that a lot of credit goes to him for putting this together. I wish I'd had this when I was going through it, and I just want to congratulate him and tell him he doesn't get off the hook. He has to do this forever and forever because it's so good, so helpful.
Well, the only lasting comment, again, I think that from my standpoint is that, and as Carla indicated, there really isn't much mystery here. And knowing what I did and how I went through that process, I wanted to make sure that people like those that are listening today understand this a little bit better. And understanding that process better is going to enable you to make the best submission possible. And the other comment that I just want to leave everybody with is this. Both Carla and I are certainly welcoming you to ask us more questions, and we will provide you if there's anything that you need to know that we didn't answer for you today. If there's something that comes up, you've got our email addresses there, so you're welcome to reach out to us without any problems. And again, nationally, on the national staff level, both Natasha and Ala are there as well, and they'll certainly welcome if there's more submission issues relative to processing, I will say, that they can help you with as well. I'm certainly they'll be glad to do that too. So don't hesitate after this presentation to not ask more questions later. And thank you.
Thanks, everybody.